Let's talk about something we all know, maybe a little too well, job stress. But what if I told you that stress isn't really the enemy we think it is? What if it's actually a source of power, something we can learn to control? Today, we're going to dive into the science of what stress actually is, and I'll show you how to flip the switch and turn all that pressure into your greatest asset. So let's get into it.
Yeah, this image, it probably feels pretty familiar, right? That feeling of being totally overloaded, kind of flickering on the edge of just poof, burning out. It's a powerful metaphor, and it really gets to the heart of what we're exploring today. You see, stress is a form of energy. So the real question is, are you going to let it burn you out, or are you going to learn how to use it to light your way forward?
So, how do we even begin to get a handle on this feeling? Well, it all starts with understanding what stress actually is. I mean, it's a word we throw around all the time, but there's some really fascinating science behind what's happening inside our bodies when we feel it. Let's take a closer look.
Okay, so this is the classic definition from Hans Selye, who's basically the godfather of stress research. And the key words here are any demand. Think about that for a second. That means stress isn't just about the bad stuff, like a crazy deadline or a tough boss. It's your body's reaction to any change. Getting a promotion? Yep, that's stress. Planning a vacation? Believe it or not, that's stress too. It's a way bigger concept than we usually give it credit for.
So, Selye discovered that our bodies have this universal playbook for dealing with any kind of stressor. He gave it a very scientific name, the General Adaptation Syndrome, or GAS for short. You can just think of it as your body's ancient three-stage survival plan that just kicks in automatically. It's basically a leftover from our caveman days, and it is hardwired into every single one of us.
So what's in this three-stage playbook? Well, first up is the alarm reaction. This is your classic fight-or-flight response, you know? Your heart's pounding, adrenaline is just flooding your system, you're on high alert. Now, if that threat sticks around, you shift into gear 2, the resistance stage. This is where your body adapts and operates at peak performance. You feel focused, strong, like you can handle anything. But, and this is a big but, this stage burns through your energy reserves like crazy. If you stay there too long, you hit the final stage, exhaustion. Your battery is completely drained, you're running on fumes, and that, right there, is where burnout really begins to creep.
That last stage sounds pretty grim, I know. But here's where this whole story takes a really interesting turn. Turns out, not all stress is bad. In fact, some stress is not just good for you, it's absolutely essential if you ever want to perform at your best.
And here they are, the two faces of stress. On one side, you've got eustress. Think of this as the good stress. It's that feeling of butterflies before a big presentation that actually helps you lock in and focus. It's the thrill of a tight deadline that pushes you to be super creative. Then, on the other side, you've got its evil twin, distress. This is that chronic, grinding stress that just leaves you feeling anxious and totally overwhelmed. It's the feeling of being buried under a mountain of work with absolutely no end in sight.
And this chart, this is one of the most important ideas in all of stress research. It's the stress and performance curve. So look at the left side. With too little stress, you're bored, you're unmotivated, and your performance is, frankly, in the gutter. But watch what happens when we add a little pressure. Performance goes up and up and up until you hit that sweet spot right at the top. That's the zone of optimal performance. That's eustress. It's where you feel challenged and engaged. But if the stress keeps piling on, you go right over the edge and your performance plummets. And that downward slope, that's the road to burnout.
So, the big takeaway here is pretty simple, but it's powerful. The goal is not to eliminate stress. I mean, come on, a life with zero stress would be incredibly boring. The real goal is to become a master of your own stress curve. It's about learning to ride that wave of optimal stress and knowing when it's time to paddle back to shore before you completely wipe out.
But what happens when we can't stay in that sweet spot? What happens when distress just takes over and we don't do anything about it? Well, that's when we find ourselves on a very slippery slope to burnout. Let's walk through the stages of that downward spiral.
And let's be really clear here. Burnout is not just having a bad week. It's a serious state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. It's what happens when you've been stuck in that exhaustion stage for way, way too long. It's this deep-seated cynicism that just poisons your attitude and a feeling of ineffectiveness that makes you question, well, everything. And burnout, it's a slow burn. It often starts with the honeymoon phase. You're all excited about a new job, just full of energy. But then you start to notice a fuel shortage. You're not sleeping as well. You're feeling a bit drained. If you ignore those signs, you slide into chronic symptoms. Now you're getting sick more often, you're irritable, and that initial excitement is a distant memory. From there, it's a short step to crisis.
Now you're feeling completely overwhelmed, pessimistic, and you might even start dealing with physical stuff like headaches. And finally, you hit the wall. This is total, complete exhaustion. You got absolutely nothing left in the tank.
Okay, so we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of stress. Now it's time to get practical. Because to manage stress, you first have to know what's causing it. So let's put on our detective hats for a minute and try to uncover some of the most common stress triggers at work.
You know, one of the biggest culprits of workplace stress often isn't the work itself, but the role you're expected to play in your organization. The expectations, the clarity or lack thereof, the boundaries, these things can be huge sources of hidden stress. So let's look at a few common role stressors and see if any of these sound familiar to you.
All right, first up, role overload. This is the classic too much to do, too little time problem. It's that feeling of just drowning in tasks, where every time you cross one thing off your list, 3 more seem to appear. Does that ring a bell?
Next, we've got something called inter-role distance. This is all about the constant battle between your work life and your home life. Are you taking calls during dinner? Answering emails while you're supposed to be on vacation? That feeling that your job is just constantly creeping into your personal time is a major, major source of stress.
And finally, there's role ambiguity. This is that super frustrating feeling of not really knowing what you're supposed to be doing. Your goals are fuzzy, your responsibilities are unclear, and you have no idea how you're being evaluated. It's like trying to play a game without knowing any of the rules. You know, sometimes the first step to managing these stressors is just being able to give them a name.
Okay, we've done some diagnosis, now for the good stuff, the solutions. This is where we learn how to take all that pressure and actually turn it into peak performance. So let's open up the toolkit.
The best way to tackle stress is really from 2 sides at once. There are things you can do as an individual to build up your own resilience, and then there are things your organization can and should do to create a less stressful environment in the first place. Let's take a quick look at both.
First, let's talk about your personal toolkit. And I'm not just talking about bubble baths and meditation, though those can totally help. I'm talking about the fundamentals. Things like building a strong support system outside of work so you have people to lean on, getting really serious about exercise and what you eat because your physical health is the foundation for your mental health, and mastering your time so you feel like you're in control of your day instead of your day controlling you. These are the real building blocks of resilience. But hey, it's not all on you. Your company has a huge role to play here. The smartest companies are doing things like job redesign, which is just a fancy way of saying they're giving employees more autonomy and control over how they do their work. And something as simple as setting crystal clear goals can make a massive difference. When you know exactly what you're aiming for, it's so much easier to channel your stress in a productive direction and avoid that role ambiguity we just talked about.
And this is what's possible when both you and your organization get smart about stress. You don't just avoid burnout, you can actually achieve what some researchers call a glow-up. This is that amazing feeling when you are so engaged in your work that you're just firing on all cylinders. You're creative, you're satisfied, you're growing. You're not just surviving your job, you're absolutely thriving in it. So in the end, it all comes back to this one powerful idea. Stress is like electricity. It holds the potential to light up your career with creativity and passion. Or it can short-circuit and burn you out, leaving you in the dark. The great news is, you now understand the wiring. You have the power to choose.